chances are that you know all about the Gulf Cartel. If you don't yet, the Gulf Cartel, also known as the Matamoros Cartel, was founded in the 1930s by Juan Nepomuceno Guerra. The cartel started by smuggling alcohol and other illegal goods into the U.S. Eventually, they moved on to other crazy criminal acts. At its peak, this Mexican crime syndicate was basically untouchable. They had local law enforcement in their pockets. The Mexican government seemed scared to be confrontational with them, as they feared the extent of collateral damage that they could cause if they tried to curb them. It has taken time and a lot of joint international effort to take on this organization. One key characteristic of the Gulf Cartel is their high propensity for violence. They move quickly, sharply, and with brutality. Anyone who crosses their path usually meets a swift death, and they use this fear to subdue the people and act with impunity. Not many people can say they've been on the wrong side of the Gulf Cartel, and they live to tell the tale. However, in 1999, two agents from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the Federal Bureau of Investigation would be in this position and somehow leave the situation alive. It remains one of the craziest stories to emerge about the Gulf Cartel. The case was so serious that it triggered a massive sweep of arrests on members of the cartel. Let's get right into it. DEA's operation in Mexico. At the time, the U.S. was starting to get more involved in bringing down the Sinaloa and Gulf Cartel. The actions of the cartels in America had started a big narcotics problem, and the U.S. government had had enough. As if that wasn't bad enough, cartels were also smuggling people into the U.S., and it was hurting immigration control. In an effort to curb this problem, the U.S. government started collecting information that could lead to the prosecution of cartel members. Since Mexico is a sovereign state, they couldn't just perform raids and arrests at any time. They had to work together with the Mexican government. The U.S. DEA was really good at infiltrating cartels, extracting information, and then, with the evidence they had compiled, work with the Mexican government to bring down key actors in the cartels. They, in particular, were interested in taking out the leaders, without whom the cartels could not function as they'd like to. Over the years, the government had been successful with this approach, and they in fact still employ this tactic to this date. The two agents in the Matamoros Standoff had gone in to meet with an informant and gather intelligence on the operations of the Gulf Cartel. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong neighborhood. Things seemed to be proceeding smoothly until they started cruising through one of the properties owned by the cartel. That was when they noticed that they were being tailed. There were several vehicles following them. There were two options available. One was to try to attempt to lose the tail. The issue with this, though, was that there was no way it was going to end well. They were outnumbered and could easily get flanked. Also, trying to escape could upset the pursuers, leading to a shootout. There was absolutely no way they would come out alive from this situation if they did that. The second option, which seems like a crazy option when you first hear it, was to just stop and try to talk their way out of the situation. And so, the agents were forced to a stop and were immediately circled by a convoy of 8 vehicles, from which 15 gunmen emerged and surrounded the agents' car. Some of them wore uniforms of the local police, though the agents couldn't tell whether they were really police officers or not. Among the gunmen was the former kingpin Osiel Cardenas Guillen, who recognized the informant and ordered the 3 of them to get out of their vehicle. The major fear that the agents had was that they'd be nabbed, interrogated, and tortured by the cartel. There was no way they could let that happen. They decided to put their diplomatic skills to the test, immediately informing the gunmen that they had no intention of being taken alive. That single move probably saved their lives. If they had given themselves up to the cartel willingly, they probably would never have been heard from again. Now the cartel had a big decision to make. They could either talk to the agents and try to reason with them, or risk the wrath of the US government by forcefully kidnapping or killing them. The Gulf Cartel had a lot of guts, but if there's one thing absolutely no one wants, even if you're one of the world's biggest and most dangerous cartels, is to get in trouble with the United States. And so, the standoff began. Say no to the big boss. The agents knew that the cartel wouldn't want to risk being an enemy of the United States, and so they stood their ground, repeatedly refusing to comply with Cardenas Guillen's orders. Their major bargaining chip was reminding him that killing U.S. federal agents would result in a massive manhunt by the U.S. government. As time passed, the incident escalated. The gunmen, who were used to violence, were ready to fire and really didn't see the point of the standoff. However, Cardenas Guillen, who knew just how high the stakes were, ordered them to hold their fire. He contemplated his options, knowing that if he made the wrong one, he'd be a dead man walking. The agents themselves knew the probability that the gunmen would engage. They knew that if they did, there was no way out, and they'd probably die. However, one of the agents had a concealed handgun next to his thigh and was planning to kill Cardenas Guillen if the gunmen opened fire. If they were going to die, he might as well take Guillen with them. About 20 minutes later, which felt like hours to everyone, Guillen allowed the agents and the informant to leave and return to Brownsville, Texas. He threatened to kill them if they ever returned. They didn't show it at the time, but everyone was relieved at the peaceful resolution to the standoff. It could have gone way worse, but the quick thinking of the agents saved their lives that day. What happened to OCL after the standoff? However, that wasn't all there was to it. The aftermath of the standoff started soon after the agents and their informant returned to the U.S. It triggered a massive law enforcement effort to crack down on the leadership structure of the Gulf Cartel. OCL Cardenas Guillen, who was previously regarded as a minor player in the international drug trade, became one of the most wanted criminals in the world. He was placed on the list of the FBI and the DEA's 10 most wanted and was accused of international drug trafficking and assault. The FBI and the DEA mounted numerous charges against him and issued a $2 million bounty for his arrest. On March 14, 2003, Cardenas Guillen was arrested in Matamoros by the Mexican army after a large shootout with his gunmen. As a matter of fact, there were 3 different shootouts during the operation. The first one occurred inside a house in the Satellite neighborhood where Cardenas Guillen had been hiding for several months the moment the military arrived. Guillen clearly had no plans of going easily, and the shootout there lasted about half an hour. Soon though, Guillen's bodyguards, who were outnumbered and surrounded, surrendered. When the military entered the house, Guillen tried to escape through a backyard wall, but was apprehended. As he was taken into custody, a second shootout broke out outside the house after his gunmen tried to prevent his arrest. The third shootout broke out near Matamoros International Airport when a group of gunmen tried to rescue him and prevent the military from transporting him to Mexico City. 3 military men were wounded in the shootouts, at least 1 Gulf Cartel gunman was killed, and 6 more were wounded. Once in Mexico City, he was handed over to the PGR and sent to Campo Militar 1, a military installation. He was then transferred via helicopter to the Altiplano, a maximum security prison in Almoloya de Juarez, state of Mexico. He was eventually extradited to the U.S. in 2007, where he was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole. One of the charges against him was for assaulting U.S. federal agents during the standoff. Several other Gulf Cartel members involved in the standoff were also eventually arrested and convicted, like Garza Rendon, who turned himself into the U.S. authorities in Texas on the 5th of June 2001 after fearing for his life. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison in the U.S. that year. Medrano Rodriguez, another cartel member, was also arrested on March 28, 2002 in Matamoros. He was sentenced to 44 years in prison on May 12, 2006. The Matamoros Standoff remains one of the most notable open confrontations between the U.S. and the Gulf Cartel, and it changed the U.S.'s view and engagement of the cartel.